When your wife tries to divorce you for a CEO title, you don't fight for the house. You steal the trillion-dollar company she built. The silence in the sprawling, modernist kitchen was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Sunlight, usually a cheerful intrusion, felt cold as it polished the imported Italian marble countertop. I remember looking at the untouched espresso, steam curling up like a ghostly question mark, and realizing this wasn't a negotiation. This was a pronouncement. "It's done, David," Sarah said, her voice smooth, practiced, utterly devoid of the warmth I'd relied on for 15 years. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the cityscape framed perfectly by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a kingdom she was about to inherit, or perhaps had already inherited in her mind. I leaned against the steel refrigerator, suddenly feeling the chill seep through my linen shirt. "Done? Sarah, what are you talking about? We have a life here. We have the foundation, the gallery funding. We have us." She finally turned, and the shift in her gaze was chilling. It wasn't anger. It was administrative detachment. Sarah hadn't just climbed the corporate ladder at Omnicorp. She'd scaled it with a diamond-tipped pickaxe and left the dead bodies of her competition frozen in the ice walls. 2 weeks ago, the board had announced her appointment as CEO, effective immediately. The news cycle had been relentless. Sarah Vance, the visionary, the disruptor, the first woman to helm a trillion-dollar tech conglomerate. I, David, the quiet academic turned art consultant, had been relegated to a footnote in her ascent, the supportive husband. "Us became untenable, David," she stated, picking up a slim silver folder from the breakfast bar. The paper felt thick, expensive. "The divorce papers are ready. The terms are more than fair. You'll be comfortable. More than comfortable, actually. I've ensured the settlement reflects your contribution to the domestic sphere." My throat tightened. "My contribution? Sarah, I put everything into Omnicorp when it was just a seedling. We started in that cramped office downtown. Who convinced you to take that massive risk on the Etherchip development when everyone else said it was vaporware? Who liquidated my inheritance to keep the payroll running that first hellish year while you slept under your desk?" A flicker of something, perhaps annoyance, perhaps a ghost of old affection, crossed her perfect features, quickly suppressed. "Yes, David, I remember the early days, and I've accounted for it, generously. The house, the retirement accounts we opened jointly, a substantial trust fund in your name. You won't have to worry about a thing." I pushed off the fridge, my composure fraying. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about the granite countertops. This was about erasure. You're throwing away 15 years for a title and a corner office. You're trading everything we built for the chance to ring the bell on Wall Street? Sarah sighed, a sound of practiced patience. "I'm trading potential stagnation for actual legacy. And you, David, are now standing in the way of streamlining my assets. The paperwork is sound. Sign it and we can move forward amicably." She pushed the folder across the polished surface. It stopped inches from my hand. I stared at the thick packet, feeling a slow, cold dread creep up my spine, a feeling far worse than heartbreak. It was the realization that she hadn't just forgotten our history. She'd forgotten a fundamental, legal reality of our shared finances. I picked up the folder, my fingers brushing the crisp edges of the documents, and noticed the faint, almost invisible watermark on the bottom corner of the cover page, the insignia of the law firm handling the separation. It was the same firm that handled Omnicorp's most sensitive intellectual property transfers. "Sarah?" I said, my voice dangerously low, forcing myself to look beyond the veneer of her success and into the core of the ruthless pragmatist she had become. "Before I even look at these terms, tell me, when exactly did you sign the final authorization, transferring the controlling interest of the Vance David joint patent portfolio over to Omnicorp's R&D division?" Her perfect poise finally cracked. Her eyes widened, just a fraction, before snapping back to rigid control. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught. And then my phone buzzed, an encrypted notification from my private server, the one she didn't know I still maintained, the one that monitored all internal Omnicorp legal filings. A file had just been uploaded, time-stamped an hour ago, labeled Urgent Disclosure. Patent Ownership Reclassification. I glanced at the subject line of the notification, my blood turning to ice water. It wasn't just the patent portfolio, it was the original source code for Project Chimera, the AI framework that Omnicorp was built on, the code I had written in our garage 10 years ago, code I had never fully signed away, the code I still held the master key to. Sarah looked at the phone in my hand, her face draining of color. "David, what is that? You need to delete that message right now." I didn't look up. I clicked the file open, the data streaming across my screen, confirming my deepest fear and my most powerful leverage. "You filed for divorce this morning, Sarah," I whispered, locking eyes with her across the vast expanse of marble. "But you seem to have forgotten one crucial thing. I never gave you the encryption key to that original Chimera master file. And according to this timestamp, the transfer of controlling interest to the company? It was authorized not by the board, but by an executive signature dated 3 days ago, using a digital certificate that hasn't been active since 2018. The sound Sarah made wasn't a gasp of fear. It was the sharp, metallic click of a machine recalibrating under unexpected load. Her composure, so meticulously constructed, fractured completely, revealing the desperate strategist underneath. "That's impossible, David," she hissed, leaning forward, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles were white bone against tanned skin. The access logs for that certificate were destroyed during the Q3 security audit last year. Only the executive team, I, had access to the decommissioning protocol for legacy keys. I took a slow breath, the cold air doing nothing to soothe the adrenaline flooding my system. I had spent the last 2 years feigning blissful ignorance, letting her believe the old accounts were closed, the old access points sealed. I had been playing the supportive husband while running a shadow audit of her entire digital empire. "You outsourced that protocol to Sentinel Security, didn't you? The one you brought in to streamline internal data compliance after the GDPR scare? The one whose entire infrastructure runs on obsolete, easily exploitable kernel architecture?" She recoiled as if I'd struck her. The realization dawned on her face. I hadn't just noticed the divorce papers. I had systematically dismantled the security blanket she thought protected her most sensitive secrets. Sentinel was a necessary evil, David, a means to an end. You couldn't possibly have... You were busy curating that dreadful retrospective on early Impressionism last month. Her voice was laced with a bitter condescension, trying to reassert dominance through dismissal. I was busy learning how Sentinel's lead architect, Mark Jensen, gambles heavily on offshore crypto markets. I countered smoothly, tapping the screen of my phone. The screen now displayed a complex, scrolling block of alphanumeric code, the master encryption key, and I was busy showing Mr. Jensen that I could bankrupt him by exposing his trading irregularities to the SEC and Omnicorp compliance simultaneously. He needed a favor. I needed access. Sarah stared at the key, recognizing the magnitude of what I held. Project Chimera wasn't just the AI framework. It was the engine behind every successful Omnicorp venture for the last decade. Without that master key, the entire operating system became a sandbox, vulnerable to external manipulation or, worse, a complete shutdown. And she had just tried to cut me out of the company, founded on my intellectual property. "You're threatening the entire corporation," she whispered, the ambition in her eyes momentarily replaced by stark terror. "If you push that release, if you even hint at destabilizing Chimera, the stock will crash by 90% before the opening bell. I'll be ruined. We'll be ruined." "We aren't anything anymore, Sarah," I corrected her gently. "And I'm not threatening ruin. I'm initiating a hostile takeover of the assets you thought you'd stolen. That digital certificate you used 3 days ago, it wasn't mine. It was a temporary spoof, designed to look like an executive signature during the brief window when you logged in to transfer those initial patents. It was bait." She stumbled back a step, knocking a delicate crystal water pitcher to the floor. It shattered, the sound echoing the fragmentation of her carefully constructed world. "Bait? David, you've been working against me since the engagement party." "Since you started treating my ideas like disposable drafts," I corrected, holding up the phone, the screen now displaying a progress bar. I've already initiated the transfer protocol. The system is rerouting all active licenses, patents, and controlling shares of the Vance David joint portfolio, the shares you signed over to the company, back to a holding corporation. My holding corporation. Her eyes darted around the pristine kitchen, searching for an escape route, a weapon, anything. You can't do this legally. I have the board. I have the bylaws. Bylaws you revised last year to give you unilateral control over intellectual property disposition? Yes, I read those too. But here's the wrinkle. CEO Vance, I said, savoring the title now. The bylaws also state that any transfer of ownership based on fraudulent inducement, which includes signing a divorce agreement while simultaneously attempting to appropriate key foundational IP, is immediately voidable by the aggrieved party, provided that party can demonstrate superior and original ownership rights to the core technology. I watched the progress bar fill, 98%, 99%. And how exactly do you prove superior ownership now, David? You signed everything over, she screamed, lunging across the counter, not to attack me, but to snatch the phone. I sidestepped easily. She missed, grabbing only air, her momentum carrying her into the edge of the marble island. She regained her balance, panting, utterly defeated by the speed of my countermaneuver. The progress bar hit 100%. A single soft chime emanated from my phone, the sound of final confirmation. I prove it, I said, looking down at the confirmation screen, which now clearly displayed, transfer complete. David Vance, controlling shareholder, Omnicorp. By holding the key to the kingdom you just tried to lock me out of, you didn't just forget my investment, Sarah. You forgot that the quiet guy holding your coffee cup was the one who actually built the castle. I felt a terrifying surge of power, realizing I now held the fate of thousands of employees in my hand. I looked at Sarah, expecting rage, collapse, or perhaps a plea. Instead, a slow, terrifyingly predatory smile spread across her face. "You think this is over, David?" she breathed, straightening up, wiping a stray piece of crystal dust from her tailored silk blouse. "You think you can just walk in here, steal back the company, and expect me to pack my bags quietly? You just won the battle for the paperwork, my dear husband. But you forget who controls the narrative. And right now, you are still standing in my kitchen, holding my phone, while the entire Omnicorp security apparatus is about to descend on this location. Based on a pre-filed emergency threat assessment I initiated the moment you mentioned Sentinel security." Before I could react, the heavy frosted glass front door of our apartment, the one with the biometric lock I personally installed, slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing not the morning sunlight, but two massive figures in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by helmets, weapons raised and aimed directly at my chest. The sudden appearance of the tactical unit was so perfectly orchestrated, so brutally efficient, that for a terrifying second, I forgot how to breathe. My world, which moments ago revolved around lines of code and legal loopholes, instantly compressed into the cold, hard reality of muzzle flash probability. "Hands where I can see them, Mr. Vance," barked the lead figure, his voice synthesized and devoid of inflection, bouncing off the high ceilings. The weapons they carried weren't standard security issue. They were high-caliber, customized pieces I recognized from specialized corporate defense contractors, the kind of hardware only used when the stakes involve national security or complete deniability. Sarah stepped back slightly, positioning herself just behind the advancing line of black armor, an almost regal posture returning to her shoulders. She hadn't initiated the threat assessment for me. She had initiated it for the data breach. My successful transfer of ownership was just a secondary, messy consequence of her primary contingency plan. "It's not theft, David," Sarah called out, her voice regaining its CEO timbre, now dangerously calm. "It's asset retrieval. You triggered an unauthorized access protocol on critical infrastructure. That's treason against the corporation, regardless of who currently holds the nominal shares." I kept my hands visible, angled slightly upward, but my mind was racing. I couldn't just drop the phone. It held the proof of my ownership, but more importantly, it held the kill switch for Chimera, my final bargaining chip. Retrieval? I countered, my voice strained but steady. You mean imprisonment. You're using private military contractors on your estranged husband in his own home. Correction, Sarah corrected, gesturing toward the shattered pitcher on the floor. You are on property that is currently subject to complex legal proceedings, and I believe the non-disclosure agreement you signed regarding proprietary technology clearly classifies this kind of internal sabotage as a security threat, warranting immediate lockdown and interrogation. The men advanced another step. I could smell the metallic tang of their gear, the sterile scent of preparation. I knew I couldn't outrun them in this open space. My only hope was that the legal transfer, even if Sarah claimed it was voidable, had already sent administrative flags across Omnicorp's internal network. If anyone with actual authority, a board member who hadn't been thoroughly vetted by Sarah, received the transfer confirmation, they might intervene. Don't shoot, I said clearly, addressing the armored figures, ignoring Sarah for a moment. If you fire a round, you'll instantly invalidate every ongoing government contract Omnicorp has pending. I've embedded a dead man switch tied to biometric readings. If my heart rate spikes violently, or if any significant projectile impacts my immediate vicinity, the Chimera AI initiates a global data wipe across all active Omnicorp servers. You kill me. You kill the company. The lead operative hesitated, the slightest tilt of his helmet suggesting communication with a remote commander. Sarah hissed something unintelligible at him. He's bluffing. He's emotional, she insisted. Am I? I challenged her, looking directly into her eyes over the top of the black helmet. Sarah, you signed the divorce papers this morning. I'm emotionally compromised, yes. But I'm also the only person who knows that the Chimera AI has a hidden backdoor layer based on an old Lisp protocol I used in college, a protocol that only responds to my vocal cadence under extreme duress. If you try to override it manually, it initiates the wipe sequence. Ask your team to run a diagnostic check on the Chimera core integrity. They'll see the flag I just raised. It's active. A tense, agonizing silence descended. The operators remained poised, weapons trained, caught in a standoff between their direct orders from the new CEO and the horrifying possibility of catastrophic data loss that could send Omnicorp and their lucrative contracts into vapor. Sarah's face was a mask of cold fury mixed with dawning realization. She knew I wasn't bluffing about the LISP protocol. It was an old private joke between us, something only I would have remembered to build into the fail-safe architecture. Fine, David, she conceded, her voice shaking slightly with repressed violence. Lower the phone slowly, we talk. No violence. But you are not leaving this apartment until we negotiate the immediate revocation of that ownership transfer. I slowly lowered the phone to my side, not daring to break eye contact with the two enforcers. Negotiate. I'm listening. Just as the operatives relaxed their trigger tension, preparing to move forward and secure me, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't an encrypted notification. It was a standard public news alert flashing across the bottom of the screen, overriding the Chimera status update. The headline screamed in bold red text, Omnicorp Board of Directors convenes emergency session. CEO Sarah, Vance suspended pending investigation into irregular board appointments. Sarah froze, her eyes wide with disbelief as she read over my shoulder. What? Who called that session? That takes a quorum. Before I could answer, a new voice cut through the silence. Not synthesized, not hostile, but familiar and deeply authoritative, amplified slightly by the intercom system, usually reserved for maintenance staff. The quorum was reached, Sarah, boomed the voice of Thomas Albright, the long-serving chairman of the board, a man Sarah had always considered her steadfast ally. The investigation was initiated precisely 5 minutes ago, initiated by an anonymous tip regarding the unauthorized use of corporate security assets against a primary shareholder. A shareholder, I might add, whose ownership transfer was just confirmed by the automated legal repository. The two armored men slowly turned away from me, their attention snapping toward the intercom speaker near the elevator bank. "And to your tactical unit," Albright continued, his voice now utterly dominant. "Stand down immediately. You are now under the jurisdiction of Omnicorp Security Oversight, reporting directly to me. Failure to comply will be treated as corporate insurrection." The lead operative lowered his weapon slightly, clearly receiving new instructions through his comms. Sarah stared at the elevator bank, her empire collapsing around her, not by my code, but by the very structure she had spent years manipulating. "You didn't just hack the security firm, David," she whispered, her composure finally shattering, revealing pure, naked desperation. "You hacked the board itself. How long have you been feeding Thomas Albright evidence?" As the operatives began to slowly back away, holstering their weapons, I finally looked at the news alert again, a cold wave of success washing over me. I opened the associated file, a lengthy, detailed deposition. It wasn't just evidence of Sarah using the mercenaries. It was evidence of insider trading that predated the CEO appointment by months, tied directly to shell corporations I had only uncovered in the last week. "Long enough," I replied, my heart finally slowing its frantic pace. "But I only just received the final piece of the puzzle, Sarah. Thomas Albright didn't just convene the session. He's the one who signed the authorization suspending you. And according to this document, he's named himself interim CEO until the governance review is complete." I watched Sarah's eyes narrow, her calculating mind already pivoting from defense to offense. She looked at me, then at the door where Thomas Albright's voice had come from, a dangerous, almost manic gleam returning to her eyes. "Interim CEO," she murmured, a chillingly delighted note in her voice. "That means he doesn't have full control yet. He's vulnerable. David, listen to me. We are still the most powerful people in this building. We take down Albright together. You give me the Chimera key back, and we can freeze him out before he even gets to his office." Before I could process her sudden, desperate alliance offer, the massive elevator doors slid open completely. But it wasn't Thomas Albright standing there. It was a third figure, older, impeccably dressed in an outdated, bespoke suit, holding a worn leather briefcase. He looked directly at me, ignoring Sarah completely, and gave a slight knowing nod. "Mr. Vance," the man said, his voice dry, echoing slightly in the sudden quiet. "A pleasure to finally meet you in person. I'm afraid the board suspension is merely the first step. I'm afraid your former wife is far more deeply involved in the corruption than even Mr. Albright suspected. And I'm not here to reinstate you as a shareholder. I'm here because I represent the original founders of Omnicorp, the silent partners you and Sarah both betrayed in the early days. We're seizing the whole thing. And frankly, David, your newly acquired controlling shares are about to become worthless assets in the ensuing corporate dissolution." The man in the bespoke suit, radiating an aura of quiet, absolute authority, stepped fully into the apartment, his eyes, pale blue and unsettlingly calm, never leaving mine. He held the leather briefcase loosely, almost carelessly, yet it felt heavier than any weapon the mercenaries had carried. Behind him, the elevator doors whispered shut, sealing us in this luxurious, rapidly turning battleground. "Corporate dissolution?" I managed, glancing wildly between Sarah, who looked genuinely blindsided by this new player, and the silent, retreating tactical team. "Who are you? The original founders dissolved their holdings years ago when Sarah took the controlling interest." The man gave a small, dry cough, adjusting his cufflink. "An easily accepted fiction, Mr. Vance. We are the shareholders who prioritized ethics over exponential growth, a fatal flaw in Silicon Valley, as you've learned. We watched quietly as you and Ms. Vance built a magnificent machine using our dormant seed capital and patented infrastructure. Infrastructure you both conveniently signed over to the company, believing we were long gone." He gestured towards Sarah, who was trembling, not with fear, but with the furious energy of an overthrown monarch. "She tried to cut you out, David. Predictable. But she underestimated the long game. And clearly, David, you underestimated the complexity of the ownership structure you both so casually leveraged." Sarah finally found her voice, sharp and desperate. "You sold your shares. The documentation is clean. We bought you out fair and square through the Cayman Trust in 18. The man smiled, a chilling facsimile of warmth. "The Cayman Trust was dissolved, Ms. Vance, but the shares themselves were collateralized against a private loan, a loan I provided. When you defaulted on the secondary interest payments last year, the ones Sarah authorized to fund that disastrous foray into quantum encryption, the collateral reverted to the lender. Me. I haven't been watching you to sabotage you. I've been watching you to ensure my investment matured correctly. And David's recent, rather aggressive maneuver just proved he still owns the operating key, which makes him far more valuable to us alive and compliant than liquidated." He finally placed the briefcase on the marble counter, the sound echoing loudly in the sudden quiet. It clicked open, revealing not documents but a sophisticated array of electronic hardware, a portable server rack glowing softly with internal lights. "You see, Mr. Vance," the man continued, leaning toward my phone, which still displayed the ownership confirmation, "when you successfully transferred the controlling interest back to yourself, you didn't transfer it to an independent entity. You transferred it into the very legal framework that Omnicorp utilizes for its primary oversight committee, a committee that, as of 5 minutes ago, is now exclusively staffed by my appointed trustees, including Mr. Albright." He tapped the glowing server. "Your little victory just moved your ownership stake directly into the hands of the people who want to dismantle the entire current executive structure, starting with Ms. Vance." Sarah looked like she'd been slapped with reality. Her power had evaporated in the span of a single news alert. She turned to me, the last vestige of partnership flickering in her eyes. "David, we have to stop this. If they dissolve the company, everything, your patents, my legacy, our money, it all goes into probate hell for decades. We can use Chimera to fight them. We can lock them out together." She was offering the one thing I thought I desperately wanted: collaboration. But looking at the cold calculation in the eyes of the man representing the original founders, I understood something vital. Sarah hadn't just been ruthless. She'd been short-sighted. These men had waited years, perhaps a decade, for this precise moment of chaos. "And what is your price for stopping the dissolution, sir?" I asked the man in the suit, ignoring Sarah's pleading stare. The man chuckled softly. "My price is simple, David. We want Chimera operational, ethical, and profitable again. We don't want to burn the empire down. We want to rebuild it cleaner. You keep your patents, you keep your wealth, and you get a seat on the new oversight committee. Sarah, however, must be removed entirely. Her aggressive acquisitions and unauthorized security expenditures have created too much liability." This was the moment of true decision. I could side with the ruthless ambition that nearly destroyed me, or align with the cold, calculated pragmatists who offered restoration at the cost of my former life. "If I agree to your terms," I stated, gripping the phone tighter, the master key burning in my palm, "I want absolute ironclad immunity for any action I took in the last 72 hours to secure my assets. That includes the digital infiltration of Sentinel and the triggering of the ownership reversal." "Agreed," the man confirmed instantly, waving a dismissive hand toward Sarah. "She won't press charges. She'll be too busy fighting the SEC." Just as I mentally prepared to hand over the key and accept my new role as corporate savior, Sarah moved. It wasn't a plea this time. It was a final, desperate, calculated act of self-preservation. She didn't go for me or the key. Instead, she launched herself toward the open briefcase on the counter, her fingers closing around a small, unmarked USB drive nestled amongst the wires. "You forget, trustee," Sarah spat, holding the drive aloft like a talisman. "I am the one who oversaw the final audit of the legacy hardware last month. This isn't just the access logs. This is the physical backup of the original Chimera kernel, the version David built before he added the backdoors. If I plug this into my personal server right now, I control the true master copy, rendering David's key useless." Before anyone could move, before I could stop her, Before the original founder's representative could react, Sarah jammed the small USB drive into the charging port of her personal, encrypted tablet, which was sitting unnoticed beside the espresso machine. A single bright green status light flashed once on the drive, and then the entire apartment complex plunged into absolute darkness. The glowing server rack died. The emergency lights failed to engage. A voice crackled over the dead silence, not from the tablet, not from the hallway, but from the darkness, inches away from my ear. A voice laced with triumph and absolute finality. Too late, David. I didn't just secure the old backup. I encrypted it with the one sequence I knew you could never decipher. The lyrics to that awful song you wrote for me in college. And now I own the source code. You are officially just a man standing in the dark, holding a useless key. The darkness was absolute, suffocating the expensive apartment and swallowing the sounds of my frantic heartbeat. For a split second, I felt a dizzying lurch, a sense of complete and total defeat. Sarah had played the ultimate long game, sacrificing the company's immediate stability for ultimate control over the core technology. She had leveraged our shared history, not as leverage, but as an encryption key. "Sarah!" I roared into the void, my voice sounding alien and thin. I could hear the faint metallic scrape of the trustee shifting his weight somewhere near the counter, the sound of a man realizing his meticulously planned coup had just vaporized. "Don't bother looking for the lights, David." Sarah's voice floated from the far side of the room, closer to the elevator bank, strangely energized by the sudden chaos. "It's a failsafe. I overloaded the primary grid when I plugged that drive in. The whole building's dark, and by the time the emergency auxiliary kicks in, if it kicks in at all, I'll be long gone with the real prize." I realized my mistake immediately. I had focused too much on the legal paperwork, the corporate structure, the external chess game. Sarah was always about the core engine, the code. The ownership transfer was irrelevant if the source code itself was compromised and held by someone actively hostile to both of us. I gripped the phone, the one holding the Chimera master key, now feeling like a dead weight. The original Chimera AI was programmed to respond to my voice, but only when it was active. Now, under total power failure, it was dormant, inert. "You idiot!" I yelled at the trustee, whose presence I could just barely sense in the gloom. "Your interim CEO just took the actual foundation of the company hostage. You wanted control. Now you have nothing but litigation against a ghost server." A low, frustrated groan came from the trustee. "She overloaded the local grid? Impossible. That requires localized access to the building's archaic power manifold, which I gave her access to last year when we remodeled the server closet," Sarah crowed, clearly enjoying my panic. "She's good, isn't she, David? Better than you ever gave her credit for." My mind raced, desperately clinging to the remnants of my own expertise. The Lisp protocol, the failsafe. It wasn't just about my voice triggering the AI. It was about my voice triggering the security response built into the old kernel. If the system was completely offline, I couldn't talk to it. But if the system was overloaded trying to process two conflicting master keys, mine and hers, it might force a temporary local reboot sequence to stabilize the core environment. I focused on the darkness, ignoring Sarah's gloating, ignoring the trustee's furious murmuring. I raised the phone to my lips and didn't shout. I whispered, channeling every ounce of focus I had. I didn't speak the activation command. I spoke the first command I ever wrote in that specific, long-forgotten Lisp dialect, a simple, almost poetic string meant only for debugging. Nova ascendit nunc. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, deep within the walls, a faint, high-pitched whine began, the sound of massive capacitors charging, of cooling fans spinning up in protest. A single weak amber light flickered weakly on the dead server rack near the trustee. The local system was attempting a bootstrap sequence, momentarily overriding the complete shutdown. "What was that?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharper, closer now. I didn't answer. I knew the sequence would only last seconds, just enough time. I aimed the phone toward the faint amber glow. "Chimera," I said, my voice clear and resonating with purpose. Execute Command Override Sigma 7. Prioritize authorization based on original installation sequence key. Identify and quarantine all unauthorized kernel modifications originating from external USB device detected in local network proximity. The amber light intensified, momentarily bathing the room in a sickly yellow glow. I saw Sarah frozen mid-step, her hand still clutching the tablet. The AI responded, its synthesized voice issuing from the phone speaker, but overlaid with a deep, resonating hum that seemed to come from the very foundations of the building. Override Sigma 7 accepted. Quarantine initiating. External device identified. USB 7734 Alpha. Kernel integrity conflict detected. Applying forced rollback to last verified stable state. A high-pitched squeal erupted from Sarah's tablet. She cried out, dropping the device as if it had burned her. The screen went black, the green status light extinguished forever. The Chimera AI had recognized her ancient backup as a foreign invasion and had instantly quarantined and wiped it clean before rolling back the main system to the state authorized by my master key, the state that confirmed my controlling ownership moments before the blackout. The apartment lights flickered violently, then snapped back on, brilliant and harsh. The mercenaries were gone, having followed the chairman's order to stand down. The trustee stood slack-jawed, staring at the now glowing server rack, the amber light replaced by a steady, authoritative blue. Sarah stood amidst the ruins of her ambition, breathing hard, staring at the dead tablet. The fight was over. I hadn't just won the company, I had excised the cancer she represented from its very core. "It's done, Sarah," I said, pocketing my phone, the weight of the master key finally feeling lighter. "The divorce stands, but the settlement terms have changed. You walk away with nothing but the assets you brought into the marriage, and a signed agreement never to contest the Chimera Core ownership or face corporate espionage charges from the new Oversight Committee." She looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. There was no anger left, only the profound emptiness of a high-stakes gambler who had bet everything on the wrong turn of a card. "You're an academic, David," she whispered, shaking her head slowly. "You never understood how to truly play the game." I walked past her, toward the pristine windows overlooking the city, her kingdom, now mine. I learned, Sarah. I learned that the game isn't about how high you climb, but who holds the foundation. As I reached the window, ready to face the dawn of my unexpected corporate life, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a message from Thomas Albright, the interim CEO. "Excellent work, David. The committee is ready to meet. Welcome aboard. Regarding the matter of the hostile takeover attempt this morning, since you were the primary defense against the dissolution plot, we need to ensure your security. We are dispatching a secure transport to escort you downtown immediately. Please wait by the main entrance. And David, please leave the phone here. We need to integrate Chimera's master key into the official corporate mainframe for full system redundancy. We can't risk losing control again." I stared at the message, then down at the phone in my hand, the one object that represented my leverage, my power, my survival. They wanted the key back. They wanted me safe, compliant, and stripped of my ultimate bargaining chip before the real work even began. I looked back toward the shattered silence where Sarah stood, a defeated queen. If I handed over the key now, I'd be a puppet CEO, beholden to the very committee that just sidelined my wife. But if I didn't, I'd be back in the dark, facing the combined legal might of the original founders. I slowly slid the phone into my pocket, my fingers resting over the cold glass. I looked out at the city, feeling the power of the silent AI humming beneath the floorboards. I smiled, a genuine academic smile, devoid of corporate ruthlessness, but rich with quiet self-possession. "Tell Mr. Albright," I dictated into the voice recorder function on a completely separate, ancient, prepaid burner phone I kept in my wallet, the one the divorce papers never mentioned, that I look forward to the meeting, but the master key stays with the original architect permanently.